Welcome in this new lesson of Module 3, Project Design. In this lesson, we will share the methodology of theory of change and logical framework. Theory of change aim is to help you explain how you think changes happen in the community where you intend to work and how your actions can influence those changes. Theory of change is also a process to clarify your assumptions about how and why change happens and communicate them to others. It helps you consider and explain the assumptions that lie behind your reasoning and shows why you think your activities will lead to the outcomes you want. This process leads to a shared understanding, which has many benefits, including allowing other views and broader perspectives, opening up your logic to scrutiny so it can be challenged and refined, becoming a better proposal and therefore a better chance of being funded. Finally, making it easier to explain your project to others. Theory of change can be used to describe the final result of a thinking process. The final result can be a diagram with a written explanation. To develop a good theory of change, you need to engage all key stakeholders. The process of developing a theory of change should begin with a description of the project's vision, also called goal or impact. This is the long-term overall change that your project is working towards. If your project is part of a program, there might be several projects all contributing to the same vision. When thinking about the vision, it is useful to consider what is realistic for your project. Your project does not have to be able to deliver the vision on its own, but it needs to bring about changes that will contribute to this vision. Next, work backwards from your vision to consider what key changes need to be created so that this vision can become real. Look beyond your own project to consider all the factors working towards or preventing change. To do this, it can help to think in terms of preconditions. Preconditions are the key changes that need to take place in order for your vision to be realized. In order to do this, look back at your problem analysis that we have seen on the previous lessons in this module to select the most important factors that need to change. Identifying these key changes is the most important part of the theory of change process. Then you have to identify activities that will cause the greatest change. What are you going to do to deliver short-term change? How will these short-term changes bring about longer-term changes? It is important that you have worked through the previous stages and only start considering which activities will be needed once you have established the vision and the preconditions. Take each precondition in turn and think about if and how your project could achieve it. This may include describing the activities you will carry out and what will make activities particularly successful. Arrows show which activities lead to which precondition, which preconditions lead to which other preconditions, and which preconditions lead to the vision. These arrows showing cause and effect should reflect the complexity of how change could happen. The theory of change is thus a strategic approach that helps define and guide social and organizational change effectively. This approach can also be applied in sport to define the strategy and actions needed to achieve a specific goal. Here is an example of how it could be applied. Assume that our ultimate goal is to increase women's participation in youth football in a local community. We begin by identifying the main problem. In the local community, girls are less likely to participate in youth football teams than boys. Next, you identify the causes of the problem. Girls may be discouraged from participating because of a lack of female role models, gender stereotypes suggesting that football is a sport for boys, or unconscious biases on the part of coaches. Intermediate goals necessary to achieve the ultimate goal are defined. Raising awareness of participation opportunities for girls in the community, creating positive female role models in youth football, offering training programs for coaches on promoting gender equality. The specific activities and interventions needed to achieve the intermediate goals are defined. Organize awareness campaigns on opportunities for girls to participate in football. Organize women's football events to promote positive role models. Organize training workshops for coaches. Theory of change is an additional process that can add further information beyond the results of the stakeholder, problem, objectives, and strategy analysis shown in the previous lessons. These results are part of the initial phase of analysis of a broader process called logical framework approach. Following phase is planning phase, and the main output that we will share in this lesson is log frame metrics. A focus on the detailed definition of activities and resources will be provided in the project management module. The logical framework approach is a technique to identify and analyze a given situation, and to define objectives and activities which should be undertaken to improve the situation. The log frame asks a series of questions as, where do we want to be? That is, what is our goal and purpose? How will we get there? That is, which will be our outputs and activities? How will we know when we have got there? That is, which indicators will be used to monitor the project? What will show us we have got there? That is, what will be the objective evidence of success? And finally, what are the potential problems along the way? That is, the risks and assumptions. It might sound complex, but it is a logical way to approach the preparatory phase. It supports the preparation of an appropriate project plan. The logical framework approach is intended as an aid to thinking. It allows information to be analyzed and organized in a structured way so that important questions can be asked, weaknesses identified, and decision makers can make informed decisions based on their improved understanding of the project. The logical framework matrix, or more briefly, the log frame, is a matrix with 4 columns and 4 or more rows, which summarize the key elements of a project plan, namely the project hierarchy of objectives, first column, summary, the key external factors critical to the project's success, fourth column, assumption, and how the project's achievements will be monitored and evaluated. Second and third columns, indicators and evidence. The log frame does not show every detail of the project. It is an overview of the key factors. Let's focus on the various parts of the matrix. The summary column outlines the project's objectives, what we want to achieve and how. There are many different words that describe different types of objectives. We use the term objective as a general term for a desired change. In the log frame, the summary separates out the different levels of objectives to form a hierarchy of objectives and uses special terms to refer to each level. When the objective hierarchy is read from the bottom up, it can be expressed in terms of if the activities are undertaken, then outputs can be produced. If outputs are produced, then the purpose will be achieved. And if the purpose is achieved, then this should contribute towards the overall goal. If reversed, we can say that if we wish to contribute to the overall goal, then we must achieve the purpose. If we wish to achieve the purpose, then we must deliver the specified outputs. If we wish to deliver the outputs, then the specified activities must be implemented. You can use the results of theory of change to help you in completing summary column. To create a log frame based on your theory of change, first, focus on the pathway where you decided your organization could have most influence. The next step is to look at each element of your chosen pathway and make it more specific to your project. Let's have a focus on each particular level of objective. Starting at the top, consider the overall impact of the project. The impact is usually beyond the control of your project, but is something you are contributing to. The goal refers to the overall problem we are trying to address. The goal is the wider long-term development goal. It is a desired state where a need or problem no longer exists or is significantly improved. The project will contribute towards this long-term impact, but will not achieve it itself. The goal will be the same for a number of projects and might be a regional, national, or international government objective. Then we have the purpose, that is the specific change that we want the project to make to contribute to the achievement of the goal. The project purpose is thus the objective to be achieved by implementing the project. Purpose is the answer to the question, what change or benefit do we want the project to achieve? The project purpose should address the core problem and be defined in terms of the benefits to be received by the project beneficiaries or target group as a result of utilizing the services provided by the program. It must be an end situation and not a description of what you will do. And so you should avoid statements such as to help, support, assist, prepare, deliver. An outcome should not describe how it will be achieved, and so should avoid phrases like, this thing will be improved by doing that thing. There should be only one purpose. If we have more than one purpose, the project will be difficult to manage, so we should consider having separate projects. Next, we have outputs. What we want to see as a result of our activities in order to fulfill the purpose. You should ask yourself what outputs are needed to achieve the purpose. What will the project deliver? Outputs are products of the activities undertaken, the combination of which achieve the purpose of the project. Outputs describe the services to be delivered to the intended beneficiaries or target group. Outputs should address the main causes of the problems the target group faces. Finally, we have activities that describe the tasks we will carry out and the actions necessary to produce the output. Activities answer the question, how will we deliver the outputs? It is likely that there will be a long list of activities to carry out. However, the log frame should not include too much detail. You have to list the main activities which are needed to achieve the outputs. There may be several for each output. Statements should be brief and use lots of action words. Once you have finished the full summary column, check that the logic makes sense. A good way to do this is to work up the boxes asking why. So we do these activities. Why? To have this output. We can also work down the boxes asking how we want to achieve this outcome. How? By delivering these outputs. When we have filled in the objectives for each level, we must make sure the statements are logically linked to each other. To do this, use the if-then test. Look at the activities. If we carry out all of the activities, then will they result in the outputs? Look at the outputs. If the outputs are produced, then will they achieve the purpose? Finally, if the purpose is achieved, then will it contribute towards the goal? We might find we need to adjust the wording of the objectives or add new ones. We might decide that some objectives are not relevant and so delete them. The if-then test is very important because often we oversimplify these links. For example, imagine being part of a football team. The following objectives have been identified. Goal: to be the best football team in the country. Purpose: to win the next game. Output: successful attack, successful defense. Activities: kick the ball, shoot the ball, tackle. Now, if we kick and shoot the ball and tackle, will this then result in successful attack and defense? And if our attack and defense are successful, will we then achieve the purpose of winning the game? What changes might we need to make to fulfill our objectives? Each objective is correct if taken standalone, but when linked, they do not pass the if-then test. Now, let's move to the fourth column, assumptions, that refers to the conditions that could affect progress, success, or long-term sustainability of the project. We have checked that each objective should lead to the one above using the if-then test. However, we can never be 100% sure that each objective will lead to the next because there will always be a risk that external factors will affect the link. Most projects fail not because of bad project design, but because a lack of attention to these factors that are either outside the control of the project or which are too difficult or costly to control. In the log frame, we need to show that we have thought about what these factors might be. This is the reason why we have an assumption column. These refer to things that must happen before the project can start. Assumptions are thus external factors that influence or even determine the success of a project, but lie outside its control. They are the answer to the question, what external factors are not influenced by the project, but may affect its implementation and long-term sustainability? It will have become apparent during the analysis phase that the project alone cannot achieve all objectives identified in the objective tree. Once a strategy has been selected, objectives not included in the intervention logic and other external factors remain. This will affect the project's implementation and long-term sustainability, but lie outside its control. These conditions must be met if the project is to succeed and are included as assumptions in the fourth column of the log frame. Preconditions differ from assumptions in that they must be met before a project can commence. The probability and significance of these conditions being met should be estimated as part of assessing the riskiness of the project. Some will be critical to project success, and others of marginal importance. Now, how can we identify assumptions? First of all, you should identify if an external factor is important. If it is not important, then you should not include it in the log frame. If it is important, you should understand if it will be realized. If the answer is almost certainly, then you don't need to include it in the log frame. If the answer is likely, then you need to include it as an assumption. If the answer is unlikely, then you should verify if it is possible to redesign the project in order to influence the external factor. If it is possible, then you have to redesign the project. If it is not possible, then the project is not feasible. There is a relationship between the first and the fourth column, and it must work as follows. Once the preconditions are met, the activities can start up. Once the activities have been carried out, and if the assumptions at this level hold true, outputs will be achieved. Once these outputs and the assumptions at this level are fulfilled, then project purpose will be achieved. Once the purpose has been achieved and the assumptions at this level are fulfilled, contribution to the achievement of the goal will have been made by the project. Once the project descriptions and assumptions have been drafted, columns 1 and 4 of the matrix, the next task is to identify indicators that might be used to measure and report on the achievement of objectives, that is, the indicators column, and the source of information, evidence column. Because one reads across the matrix when analyzing indicators and evidence, this is referred to as the horizontal logic. Now let's see the indicator column. Indicators enable us to measure how a project is performing against the changes it is aiming to make. Log frames sometimes call indicators OVI, objectively verifiable indicators. The term objectively is used because indicators should not depend on the point of view of the person measuring them. Indicators describe the project's objectives in operationally measurable terms, i.e., quantity, quality, time, or QQT. Specifying OVI helps to check the feasibility of objectives and helps form the basis of the project's monitoring and evaluation system. They are formulated in response to the question, how would we know whether or not what has been planned is actually happening or happened? How do we verify success? Objectively verifiable indicators should be measurable in a consistent way and at an acceptable cost. Good indicator should be relevant. Is the indicator relevant to the objective it is measuring? Should be sufficient. Is more than one indicator needed? Should be specific. It must be referred to quality, quantity, and time. It should be measurable. Can the indicator realistically be measured? Should be sensitive to the changes that will be happening as a result of the project. If the planned changes happen, will the indicator still be appropriate and measurable? It should be cost-effective. Can the indicator be measured with reasonable cost and effort? Is the cost of measuring the indicators proportionate to the total cost of the project? And finally, indicators should be available. Can the indicator be measured at the planned time? Now, let's focus on indicators for each level and give a brief information. Goal level indicators. Since the project contributes towards the goal but cannot be wholly responsible for achieving the goal, the indicators at goal level may reach beyond the end of the project. They might not be measured by our organization, but be included in government statistics some months after the project has ended. Of course, one problem of using such an indicator is that it will not tell us how much of the progress is due to our project, and how much of it is a result of projects by other organizations. Purpose level indicator. Indicators can be difficult to identify at purpose level. This is because the purpose objective often defines a change in behavior, which can be difficult to measure. Some creative thinking is needed for setting indicators at this level. Output indicators. Output indicators should be easier to measure than higher level objectives, because we have more control over these objectives. The output indicators can be transferred to the member of staff or consultant that is responsible for delivering the output. Activities indicators. The indicators at activity level usually include a summary of the inputs or budget. The clearest indication of whether activities have happened successfully is if the outputs have been delivered. However, complex outputs, it can be useful to include activity level indicators that show progress towards completing the output. Now, let's see the evidence column. Evidence refers to the source of the information needed to measure indicators and thus performance. Who will be responsible for collecting it and how often? Evidence indicate where and in what form information on the achievement of the goal, the project purpose, and the outputs can be found and described by the objectively verifiable indicator. When you focus on indicator, consider the type of data needed, such as survey, the source of the data, whether secondary, collected by someone else, or primary, collected by our organization. Who will collect and document the data? Frequency and dates of data collection. For example, monthly, quarterly, annually. When appropriate evidence for each indicator has been identified, consider whether it is available. If we want to use secondary data, will we be able to gain permission to access it? Will it be reliable? Consider whether it is low cost. Will the information be too expensive to collect? And finally, consider whether it is timely. Will we be able to collect the information when we need it? For example, sometimes government statistics are not released until some months after the data was collected, because it takes time for them to be analyzed. If the evidence is not available at low cost at the right time, the indicator should be changed to one which can measure more effectively. The key to completing a log frame is to fill in the hierarchy of objectives by working down the summary column. Then work upwards through the assumptions column, and then work across each row to identify the indicators and evidence for each objective. By completing the log frame this way, we avoid getting too involved in the detail before the project structure has been developed. In this slide, you can see the sequence of the overall process. From 1 to 4 is the definition of hierarchy of objectives. From 5 to 7 is the identification of assumptions. And finally, in each row, there is the definition of indicators and evidence for each objective. In this matrix, you can see the overall contents of each part of the log frame, as explained so far. It can be a good starting point to summarize all the logics of the matrix when you decide to undertake the design of a new project. At the end, you can have a final check of how you use the log frame. When the log frame has been filled in, recheck it to make sure it is logical. In particular, ensure that objectives are stated clearly and logically linked to the higher objective. Ensure that the project has only one purpose. Ensure that all key assumptions have been made and the project is likely to be a success. Ensure that indicators and evidence are reliable and accessible. Ensure that the indicators can measure the progress and impact of the objective. Ensure that the activities include actions needed for gathering evidence. And finally, ensure that the indicators and evidence can be used for monitoring and evaluation. Finally, let's underline once again why log frame matrix is so useful for your project design. Because it helps people to organize their thinking. It helps people to think logically. It helps identify weaknesses in project design. It ensures key indicators are identified from the start of the project so that monitoring and evaluation are easier. In addition, it helps people to summarize a project plan on a few sides of paper. This helps them to communicate their plan simply with others. Also, a log frame is not a substitute for writing a full plan. And finally, it ensures that people involved in the project use the same terminology. Thank you for taking this lesson on project design, theory of change, and the log frame approach. Now, you can try your hand at the case study by applying all the concepts learned in this lesson.